This is kind of interesting technology.
So is this the first Blab for you?
This is, yeah. I've not used this software before. I didn't know it existed. I've used others, but not this one.
So it's still in beta, as you see in the top there. It says beta, and I think if I'm correct, they just started coding this like 4 or 5 months ago. It's that new, but
wow.
I like how you see that the help guys come in there so fast. It's really fantastic.
Yeah, agile.
So, yeah, great. Life in beta, but it's got its things. So I'm Jamie Good. For those of you watching, I'm the digital fluency coach. I help people future-proof their careers and business, and I'm really excited to be talking to Mike today. If you'd like to introduce yourself, let us know what you do, who you are. That'd be great.
Sure thing. I'm Mike Rohde. I am actually a designer by day, so I work as a UX designer on a small team building software, much like this, but in a different space, in the insurance space. And I do sketchnoting stuff at night, so that's sort of my secret superhero power, I guess.
That's awesome.
So what this all started, sketchnoting started about 2006, 2007. I had been taking notes for a few years and really got frustrated with the way they were going. For some reason, I'd fallen into this process of writing verbatim notes by hand in giant books with a pencil, with this idea that if I captured everything, I could go back and find it. But I never went back to look at anything. And the pencil was there in case I made mistakes, so I could go back and fix the mistakes, because I was worried that, I don't know why I was so worried about that. And it had become too difficult to maintain. And I decided I needed to make a change and go in a different direction. So early 2007, I decided maybe the solution is to change up my tools, and let's see what happens with that. Put some limitations on myself. So my solution was taking a small moleskin notebook that I had around and didn't know what to do with because it was so beautiful, to just try and use it for something. And it was much smaller than the large books. So the books I had been using were, I think, at least letter size, maybe 11 by 14. So they're quite big with lines in them for writing. Switching to the moleskin, it was blank pages and it was quite small. I could put it in my pocket. So there were some advantages to it. But because I had this limited space, it forced me to change the approach I took to taking notes. I couldn't write everything the way I used to. The other change that I made, besides the size of the book, was switching from a pencil to a pen. And I think that was interesting because having to use a pen, when I would write things on the page, they pretty much were there. So either I had to live with them or I had to change them into something else. And the combination of not being able to capture everything and having to be deliberate about what I drew led me to a third place, and that was trying to analyze things in the moment and having more time to think about things in the moment and deciding which will I keep and which will I not. So what I realized was, in meetings before, I would just capture everything almost indiscriminately without making any judgment whether it was good or valuable or not. And I ended up with this forest of notes that was impossible to go through and find gems in, right? So I thought, well, why couldn't I move the gem seeking part into the actual interaction of me capturing the notes? And that was sort of what happened. Because I had more time, because I wasn't capturing so much, and I was being more deliberate about what I captured, I could also be deliberate about the ideas that I maintained and those that I didn't. And it gave me the freedom to focus on the things that I thought were valuable and let the things that were not related to me go. And that gave me sort of this result of sketchnoting, which was still writing the notes in text, but adding visuals to them, drawings. And I love lettering. So, emphasizing some point with larger lettering and spending a little time on it made that a fun process. And as I continue to do it, I used social media at the time, which was Flickr, just before Twitter hit. And it was really well received. People really liked looking at it, both those who were in the events, but also people who hadn't been at the events could look at the works and say, oh, there's some really interesting ideas there, or that's a really interesting looking conference. I think I'll go when it comes to my city. Those kind of things could happen. And it provided sort of an interesting new medium. In some ways, sketchnoting has existed for a long time. Leonardo and others have used drawing and writing together to capture ideas for a long time. But this was the first time in at least in the modern era, where it sort of had been given a name. I when I go and do speaking or events or things like that, inevitably I'll have one or more people come up and say, oh, I've been doing sketchnoting for years. I just never knew what to call it. That's really common. So that tells me that this is a thing and people just don't know what it is, and having some identifying name for it really puts a wrapper around it and lets people sort of focus on it. So that's really sketchnoting in a nutshell, how it came about. And what sketchnoting is basically using the writing or the text you use now and adding visuals to it. And at the next level is sort of being more deliberate or conscious of what are the things that I'm capturing, because let's say go to an average conference, there might be hundreds of ideas that are coming through your mind, and you can't really work on all of them at once. You have to pick some that are more likely to succeed in your situation. So why not filter that in the moment and decide, maybe that's not that interesting. Or if you can get recordings, you just capture the things that are valuable to you. And if you feel like there's something you missed, you can always go back and watch or listen to your own recordings for that matter. And put more focus on the things that capture your mind in the moment. So that's really the emphasis, is that analog drawing with listening. And of course, you can use digital tools to do the same thing. I've just found that the analog tools just, for me, tend to perform better.
Yeah, I think one of the other things is when you're using pen to paper, neuroscience has been talking about this a lot lately, that there's more connection to your brain and what you're doing than if you were to type and just watch on a screen. So I think there's that element to it too, that probably in your memory it would be quote unquote lodged in your memory better that way as well.
Yeah, I think there's been a couple of studies that I've sort of cited. One is an old one from the 70s, and it's this idea that we have two channels in our brain. One is focused on verbal things like writing and speaking, and the other is on visual things that you see, drawing. They're both very powerful, but the studies suggest that they become amplified when you overlap them. So when you mix writing and drawing together, that it connects in more parts of your brain, and that provides a better memory for you to come back to. So that's an interesting tidbit. And the second one is a more recent study. I think that maybe is the one you are referring to, where they did studies with half the group did typing notes from like a TED Talk, and the other just wrote longhand notes. And they found the longhand note takers had retained better memory of what it was that they learned and the concepts of what it was. Where the people that did the typing tended to just type verbatim and couldn't remember beyond a week. The drop off on their memory really went rapidly. And then I think they even ran it again, realizing, okay, when people get on a keyboard, they just naturally type verbatim notes, right? What if we tell them don't type verbatim notes? They would still and eventually fall back into that rut and end up typing verbatim notes even after you told them not to. Whereas with the handwritten notes, it's not even really possible to keep up with someone, right? Unless you're doing shorthand, which they weren't. And so they inevitably fall back to capturing concepts as much as they're able. So it's interesting. I hope there's more studies that go deeper into that and are more pervasive with bigger groups.
Yeah, I agree. I'm super interested in what it does to our brains too. So I think that's fascinating. And I would guess that if you've got your notebook in front of you after your conference and you've just got kind of like you had before, trying to capture almost anything and it's all written, even if you had the time and wanted to go back in, you're kind of overwhelmed. And I would imagine that with the drawings and the images, and it looks like there's a bit more color and it's a bit more fun, that you actually want to go back to your notes and look at them again. Which is something I don't think a lot of people can say after a conference.
And, everyone is working to a different degree, right? Like I've been practicing drawing for a long time. I've been doing sketchnoting for, 8 years or something. So I've got to lead, people, and I'm trying to explore so I can share what I'm learning with others. Like, hey, this seems to be working. Try this out. Those kind of experiments. And everybody's got different degrees of drawing skills, but I don't think that a lot of people will come to me and say, I can't draw, so can I sketchnote? I think that's a huge question. And in the two books that I've written, I've really tried to emphasize drawing skill is unrelated to the ability to draw and communicate ideas, because that's really what we're talking about. Whether it's a great drawing or not doesn't matter, so long as you can use it as a communication to share an idea with somebody else. That's really at the core or at the heart of sketchnoting, listening and then communicating in the simplest way possible.
Yeah, and that's one thing I really liked is that when you, with the Sketchnote handbook, that it was done in such a way that you could just do a rectangle plus a circle plus a triangle, for example, and still get what you needed to be able to create a visual memory or a record of what you were experiencing or listening to, etc. I just to the side notes there. There's some people who are communicating with them. I don't want to ignore them. So someone says it's great to hear your story because they have the Sketchnote Handbook, which is this great book right here that I love so much too. Too bad I couldn't get you to virtually sign it for me. And someone is asking, can you sketchnote on iOS? I'm guessing they're asking maybe is there an app or something like that?
Yeah, there's actually many people use it and they're quite good at it. There's someone I had in a workshop just this last week. I'm trying to remember what the app was that she was using. I thought it was Note Shelf, but I could be wrong. I know my friend Mauro Taselli, who helps me run Sketchnote Army. He really likes paper, and I like paper too. I haven't really spent lots of time in the digital space to explore much, but there's tons and tons of iOS apps that can work well. I think what it comes down to is personal preference. So there's a couple of elements like if you feel like you need a stylus, that's one part of it, right? Finding a good stylus that fits your needs. My friend Jen Torres, who used, I think it was Note Shelf, she uses her finger, and her handwriting and drawing is amazing. But what the nice thing about that app is you can zoom in and draw, use a full screen to draw a small thing and then zoom it back down. So you can get that kind of detail. And I think the apps are getting better. I'm very excited for the new iPad Pro, which has got like almost a 13-inch screen. But the more exciting part of that isn't so much the screen size, which is good. It's that they've quadrupled or something the resolution of the pickup. And then they've got a pencil that's designed to make use of that increased resolution to do really fine, almost pen and paper style drawing. So I'm really excited to try that.
I think that would be a perfect tool for what you're doing. The other thing that, I've actually ordered what I'm apparently supposed to get it end of this month or November. The Rocket Book. Have you heard of the Rocket Book? It's like it's a microwavable notebook, basically. And I think that's going to be something I'm looking forward to using because one of the things for me is when I'm doing the notes and I'm filling up my notebooks, then I've got to store them somewhere. And so what I like about the Rocket Book is the ability to, put it in the microwave and erase all the pages, but the fact that it automatically sends to where you want it to go after you snap the photo with the app. So Dropbox, Evernote, Google Drive, wherever. I really like that. So I'll be able to still do the drawing and the sketchnoting, but I won't have a stack of books that I need to store after. I'll just be able to keep reusing this book, go into Dropbox, Google Drive, or whatever, and then access these the notes afterwards. And I think that's going to be really exciting.
There's lots of innovation going on in that whole digital analog hybrid space. So there's that one. That's one thing. I have some friends in Berlin that did a Kickstarter called the Beta Book, which is two different sizes of whiteboard. So they're whiteboards that fold up and look like moleskins with the strap and so on. And you open them up. They come with a piece of cloth for an eraser, and then Neuland refillable whiteboard markers inside. And the idea is you draw in this little whiteboard. You take a photo in whatever you want, Evernote or Dropbox. I'm noticing like even Dropbox or Box are starting to release software that all it does is take pictures and stick it in a Dropbox where you tell it to go. Evernote's got a really nice scanning feature in the app that automatically balances your contrast and such. So the idea is that you draw on this whiteboard, you take a picture, it goes into whatever it is that you're using, then you erase it, and then you draw another one. So that's another interesting perspective. Moleskine has partnered up with both Evernote and Adobe to do notebooks. So the Evernote ones have been around a bit longer. They're designed to scan, and Adobe's got one that I've been experimenting with where you can draw in the notebook. And when you take a picture with the app, which has pretty reasonably fine settings to determine like how much detail or how little detail would you like, it then saves a JPEG and an SVG, which is a vector file if you're technical, into your Adobe Cloud account. And then what I've done is I've used that SVG and opened it in Adobe Illustrator. Then I can play around with the points and details. So it's kind of there's all these different interesting solutions for still being analog, but then blending it into your digital workflow. And I'm seeing
Yeah,
some
which is
people. Oh, go
fantastic. I
ahead.
love it. I also want to just say some people on the side there. You can, if you want to ask a question, you can do /Q, then write your
Sure.
question. It will highlight it as a question for us. And if you want to ask Mike any questions live, there's an open seat there, and just grab it,
Oh,
and you
nice.
can come on and ask anything you'd like. So there's that too, if anyone is so inclined. So you mentioned the Sketchnote Army, and that's one thing that I remember when I first heard about it. I'm like, oh, I love that term and the name. But I'm not sure everybody would know maybe what that is or what
The
that
story
entails
behind
and
it.
why you decided to start it. So what is the
So Sketchnote Army was something that
Sorry?
began in 2009. I've been working for about 2 years on sketchnoting and sharing my own work. But I found it was really difficult to find. It was difficult for me to find other people's work without doing lots of searching around. I could find it on Flickr if I did searches. I had RSS feed searches running, and I would sort of turn things up all over the place because there wasn't really any place to save things. You could find things on Twitter, but there wasn't really a showcase where you could see other people's work. So my thought was, why couldn't I create a website where we showcase other people's work? It sort of coincided with me sort of wanting to share other people's work besides my own. And so I had this idea of an army of sketchnoters being able to go to events or a place where it's a community of people that do this work, and found that the URL was free. And so I booked it and started posting other people's work there, as well as my own occasionally. But really the focus is on sharing the work of others so that they can get, so they could get notoriety and attention.
Awesome.
And, it's kind of cool to have your stuff shared. I mean, that's an important part of the process for many people, is this confirmation that what they're doing is right or good. And I think it's a really interesting cycle. So especially people who don't feel like they're artists, we started seeing lots of people submitting their first sketch notes. Like they'd read the book and try it, and then they'd submit their work, whatever they'd first done. So we created a category which you can find called First Sketch Notes, and you can sort of run through and see, and they're definitely non-artists there. And what we found was, by people posting, not only were they psyched because their stuff was being published on Sketchnote Army, but other people were then getting excited because, hey, look, they're about the same level of drawing skill as me, and they're on Sketchnote Army. Why can't I do this? And so it encouraged them to try and then submit their own work. Yeah. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic that's happening. So it looks like Jamie's
and it's I think it's become a
your
community
signal is getting
too.
spotty on us. I see a little poor internet signal thing under your head there. And I have your audio, so just to give you a heads up. At least that's what I'm seeing on this side.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Right. I think the thing about the Sketchnote Army I like too is that you created a community around this as well.
Yeah, I think community is really important for me. I think it really helps people feel encouraged to do things, and I think there's lots we can share. I've been in several communities, and I've always liked having that aspect sort of tied into work that I was doing, and I wanted to develop something. I knew there probably was, if it had started picking up, and I wanted to provide some place that was safe and encouraging and optimistic, where we're not fighting all the time and we're just, encouraging each other. That was the kind of a community I wanted to build after, being parts and observing other communities that had done that as well. So now my chief operating sketchnoter, Mauro Tiselli, runs the site most of the time. He's just excellent at getting things together and making things work smoothly, and that allows me to sort of take a higher level view of the site and think about what things can we do, what kind of interesting interviews can we do. We just did an interesting interview not long ago with it was the guy who calls some British football for one of the smaller teams, but he's on the BBC, and he uses this visual note-taking to prepare for the games. So he writes out all the players and where they're from and little details on the left page. And on the right page, as the game unfolds, he writes the goals and the fouls and all the other things. So he ends up with this document, but it's visual, of the game. And he says it really helps him do his call. So he's doing a radio call while he's doing this work. It's really fascinating. So thinking about what kind of things can we feature that maybe encourage the community that's starting to build itself here. And we have some other stuff lined up, some ideas that we want to explore for the community, just to make it more encouraging for them.
So he's using it right in his like work life, like right there on the job. So that was one of the questions I had for you is, as because you're an author, speaker, you have workshops that you facilitate, and then you illustrate, and all of these kind of hats that you wear. How do you use, or do you use sketchnoting just in work to help you, just in terms of your work, or maybe being more productive, getting things done? Is there parts of your work life that you use sketchnoting in, as opposed to just sort of at night when you're enjoying a TED Talk, for example?
Exactly. I think I sort of use that day and night, superhero thing as sort of a funny way to remind people that I'm a user experience designer, but sketchnoting is definitely part of my day. And the environment where I'm in now, there's lots of allowance for me to experiment and include it. So some of the things that we're doing, like I have a logbook that I keep around to help me remember what I'm doing through the day at work, and I write all kinds of things down, like pixel widths and whatever it is, meeting notes, and I have a running log, and I use lots of sketchnoting techniques. They're not beautiful, but they're really functional. So I use visuals in those quite a bit. Sometimes I'll draw wireframes for an idea, or just to help me remember, I'll use that notebook. So that's happening almost every day. We have lots of whiteboards in this space, and one of the activities our team is doing is every Monday from 10 to 11, we have a standing meeting where we do whiteboard wireframing. So I use the sketchnoting techniques again, but on a larger scale. So I'll go up on the board and we'll have a discussion about a feature we want to add to our software, and I'll draw out what are the options and which ones do we like and what are the pluses and minuses, using different color inks and some of the simple drawing techniques to capture these interfaces. Yep. And then when we're done with the meeting, we'll take a picture of that, and it'll go into a repository that if a developer gets to that first, they can pull it up and use it as a starting point to build with. And if I get there first, I'll do a mock-up and put the specs on it. And it's also a space where I do most of the drawing because they like my drawing, but the pen is always available for others to come up and draw their thinking. And we're finding that it really helps them, the other developers, even though they're not artists, draw out what they're thinking so we can all understand what they mean, and it's really helpful. So that's another way that's being incorporated, and it's the whiteboard stuff that we're doing is getting noticed, and we're getting invitations inside the company to do other work that explores this visual representation of ideas. So that's really encouraging. So it's actually sort of bleeding into my day job.
Yeah, that's so interesting how it's giving you other opportunities within the company. I don't think people maybe think about that once they get started, there can be so much else that happens. There's someone on the side here is saying that they use sketch notes in both professional life as well as their spiritual life as well, which I think is really interesting. I guess it's Tahira. If you want to grab the open seat and ask Mike any questions or share your story, go for it. And Krishna has shared the interview that you were talking about. I saw that popped up,
with Sunderland Football Club. Nick Barnes.
Yeah, which is great. So
check that out. It's a great interview. He talks a little bit about his method. So there was we discovered him through another site. I can't remember who the site was now, but when I saw it, I was like, oh, that's really cool. And but they didn't talk a lot about his process. So we thought, if there's a gap here, we could get into like what color, why do you use these colors? What's your sort of the mode of why he's doing the things the way he does, which would attract a sketchnoter to think like, oh, I could steal that idea, right? Like the functional stuff as well as the concept, right? So that's the kind of value I think we can bring as we look at it from a little bit different perspective than just a traditional news site, where it's more of a novelty. Like we're like getting into the nitty gritty, like what pens are you using? What notebook are you using? Those kind of questions,
Yeah, and after this interview, I create a Padlet, which is kind of like a show notes thing. So I'll make sure that I put that in there. And if you have any sketches or any images that you'd like to share in there, I'll send you the link as well, and we can add that for people. Actually, she says that she was born north of Newcastle. Nice. So
excellent.
That's an interesting coincidence, eh?
Yeah, I love that. That's pretty cool. And I think there's probably more examples of this that exist. So it's kind of fun to see them pop up. It's like we have Tahira's calling in.
Yeah, we'll see if it. Hopefully, it will connect. And oh, here we go. Looks like.
Hey,
Hey, how are you doing?
This is so awesome. Can you hear me?
So, is your name Imani?
Yes.
And where are you calling from?
I'm calling from San Jose, California.
oh wow, okay.
Oh, great. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Feel free to ask or say to Mike anything you'd like if you have any questions or anything.
Yeah, so I actually have a question. I'm a teacher at a high school, and I'm a homeroom teacher. So I have a couple students who organically sketch note. It's just like a part of their process, similar to me. I think it's probably an artist thing.
Yeah.
My question is, they're having issues with other classes where specific note-taking strategies are considered the norm, where they need to be following a specific format, and so they're having more struggles doing the form that their teachers are asking of them versus what's naturally giving them the most retention informationally. What are some tools that I can give to like my homeroom mentees or even offer to my colleagues to kind of bridge that gap?
That's a really great question. I don't know if I have all the answers, but I think one of the things you could do is have the students, maybe you and the student could approach the teacher that's very strict about their note-taking method and say, hey, these guys, they really take things in visually. I see that they're comprehending. Would you be willing for one class to do an experiment where they sketch note? And maybe there's a way that you can blend their visual way of taking notes into the format that the teacher likes. So what is the principle behind this note-taking method? Is it certain boxes that you put things in? Could we draw in those boxes instead of writing, for example, right? So, or what is that principle behind the note-taking? There must be one that helps. Is it easier for the teacher to grade because things are in a structured way and they can see that the notes are being filled in properly or not, right? Say you're not writing notes on this, you're not getting it or something. Sure. Is there a way that you can sort of be creative within that framework to produce something interesting that both lets the student be visual, but also delivers what the teacher is looking for their grading or I'm assuming that they just want to make sure that the student is comprehending the concepts, right? So that would be where I would sort of go to is there some way like where we can both flex a little bit and make it a win-win? That might be a way to approach it. And maybe it means that you sort of have to advocate with your students and the teacher together around the table and sort of find a common ground somehow. But without knowing details, I don't know if that's possible or what it would be, but maybe there is. It would seem to me like the Cornell note-taking method is, put together for a specific reason to help you define your content a little bit more instead of just having free form. Right. Maybe for some students it makes it easier. So that's where I would head.
Okay.
And if you want to reach out to me, I have I'm starting to make lots of friends in the education community, and I'd be more than happy to connect you up with them for more specific answers. Like they may know, maybe they've already done that. There's someone specifically you can reach out to on Twitter. So if you want to write down this name, or I could type it in the notes. Her name is Wendy Pilars. She's in the Carolinas, and she's releasing a book. It may be released now. I'm not sure if it's released yet. And it's Sketchnoting for Educators. So it talks specifically how to apply visual note-taking in an educational setting. And that might provide more stuff for you just to even milk even more of the goodness out of sketchnoting in that context. Because, I'm writing in a broader scope of like everybody, where, education has very specific restraints and requirements. And I think Wendy might have some great feedback. And I can connect you up to her personally if you want to chat with her too. So
sweet.
She's pretty cool. No problem.
Thanks. All right.
See you later, Imani. Yep. Bye.
Awesome. That was a great question. One thing that I learned from a graphic recorder last week was the idea of visual templates and sort of creating a template that's a more visual way of approaching, let's say, a meeting or a problem-solving session or something. And so I'm doing a couple of workshops next week, and I've decided to sort of integrate that into what I'm doing, where I'll give people this visual template and ask them to kind of fit into the the drawings, I guess, their ideas, solutions, etc. And one of the things I think might help with that is instead of having to say 5 times what I want people to do when I want them to collaborate, which usually happens, sometimes with a workshop, they will be able to see immediately, because it's so visual, what I want them to do, and kind of the steps to follow. So I think that visual template idea is really
in the
great
Sketchnote
too.
workbook, there was one of the samples, an interview was with a woman who uses visual templates like that in her meetings. So very much like that. It provides sort of a base structure to work within. It's not overly, you don't have to fit it too tightly, and you can just sort of adjust it, I guess, based on what you're trying to get out of it, right? It can be very structured, or it could be loosely structured, right?
Yeah.
Like dividing a page in half is a structure, right? It's, pros and cons, that's a structure. It's a very simple one, but that's a really great idea.
I see someone wrote here on the site as well that they've just published a book in Belgium on note-taking strategies and visual knowledge and ways to use visual knowledge. And there's a chapter on sketchnoting in which you and your work are
that's really cool. I'd love to, if you want to send me a link. I think that's Laren Hozo. It looks almost Dutch to me, yeah. Belgian, that makes sense. I'd love to see a link.
Laren, if you want to put the link there on the side for everybody, I'll share it in the show notes after for everybody to be able to grab that. So that would be awesome.
Row Design Dispatch, which is like every 2 weeks I post interesting stuff related to sketchnoting and drawing and pens and paper and stuff. It's coming out this week. If you can get a link to me, and maybe I can sneak that into this episode of the Dispatch, because people are hungry for new books and different ways of looking at the same idea. I'd love to be able to do that.
Oh, that would be amazing. And I know Deborah is on here too. Deborah, if you want to join a seat, go for it as well. So one other thing that I was wondering about is, because you've mentioned tools a couple of times. Let's say I've never, ever done this before. And I might have drawing skills, might not. Maybe that's really not the relevant point. But because I'm sure you get asked this question all the time. People are like, well, where do I start? How do I start? What kind of notebook? Should there be lines on it? What size should it be? And you had mentioned that you switched from pencils to pens for a specific reason. So when you get that question, where do I start? What kind of tools and things would you recommend?
Well, one of the things I love about sketchnoting was this idea that it's sort of tool independent. So it kind of depends on you. Of course, that doesn't help when you need some sort of a direction. You can use I've used printer papers in workshop and it works great. Just crack open a ream of paper, fold it in half and staple it and you've got a sketchbook, right? And that's as simple as it can be, right? Or you can, I'm a fan of Moleskine notebooks, specifically the sketchbook format. If you tend to use a lot of ink, holds ink really well so it doesn't bleed to the backside. There's a few other notebooks that I've been really using a lot. One is called the Baron Fig, and I can type that. It's called the Baron Fig Confidant. It's about $16 for every book you buy. They plant a tree, so they're sustaining their paper use, which is cool. It's a really nice book. It's got a linen cover. It's got a yellow page marker. The paper is a little bit thicker than a Moleskine. It holds ink generally better. And the size of it's almost identical to an iPad mini. So it's got a really nice proportion to it. It's a little bit wider than a typical Moleskine, but about the same height, more or less. They also have a pocket size sketchbook you might want to look into. Field notes are another, one you can get in different colors, and they're small. They're intended for your pocket, but they do have some larger sizes. So, there's a variety of different notebooks. Another brand that I'm really liking lately is called Leuchtturm 1917. It's obviously German. Really high quality books, really nice paper. And they're pretty reasonably priced. You can get them in all different cool colors. If you look on Amazon, let's say if you're in the US or Canada, you can look that up and you can see they have diaries, they have blank books, line books, grid books, dot grid books. So they're probably the closest competitor to a Moleskine in sort of format and size. One of the challenges of getting a really nice book is you might be intimidated by the book. And you're afraid to write anything in there unless it's good, right? So that's a challenge too, where maybe for you it's better to go to the art store and get a spiral bound sketchbook that's cheap, just to kind of get things flowing where you don't feel like you're wasting a page. a lot of that's really mental, like, you just need to sort of use it. I mean, the flip side of that is, hey, look, if you're going to do this, if you have a really nice pen and a really nice book or paper, you're more likely to enjoy the process or the experience. So, I mean, that's another way to look at it as well. Yeah. Some people like having books that lay flat. The Baron Fig is nice because it does lay pretty flat, even though it's a bound book. But maybe you prefer a spiral bound. Maybe that works better in your situation where you can lay it flat, or you can flip it around and have the page right there and be able to work with it, or tear out a sheet. So for you, maybe that's more important. So I think it's important to maybe try a couple of different notebooks and experiment with them and see which one seems to fit, and not feel too worried if it's something doesn't fit you and you need to switch. As far as pens go, I've got a couple of favorites. I've actually been using these. I've been favoring quite a bit. This is a Flair felt tip pen. I used to use these in middle school and high school a lot, and I sort of forgot about them. And somehow or another, I saw one on a table and picked it up and started using it and fell back in love with it all over again. So I've been really enjoying sort of the richness and the immediacy of the Flair. So that's one that you can look into. They're really cheap at pretty much any store. I tend to like good pens you can find in any like grocery store or Walgreens, or any type of drugstore that you might run into. Like if you say travel to another city and you lose your pen, you could go to Walgreens and buy another one, and it wouldn't break the bank, right? There's something I like about that, and I think that the quality of the gel and other pens are getting so good now that they are rivaling some really nice pens. Now, there's nothing wrong with buying a fancy or rollerball pen like a Retro 51, which is a beautiful pen. If you want to go in that direction and you want to make it more of a high-end experience because that makes you feel better, you should go for that. Another pen that I'm liking is this one. It's called the Pentel Energel. So I don't know how much detail you guys can see on that. So they come in two styles. This is the capped style. The reason I carry this is I carry it in my pants pocket, and it just pops off. I can, of course, put the cap on the end, but I like it because I know that it's sealed. I'm not going to accidentally unretract it in my pocket and ruin my pants, but they do make these same pens in a retractable format. Okay. And what's cool about those too is the refills inside. You can open it up and take it out and put it into a fancier pen. So if you come to like that flow, you can sort of take out many of the inserts in the fancier pens, like the Retro 51 or others. You can sort of look and see if it's a little bit too long. You just use a knife and cut the end off, and it'll typically fit right in there and work pretty well. Wow, so it's kind of a fun little hack that you can make use of.
Yeah. For sure. That's great.
I've been a big fan of the Pilot G2s as well. It's another nice pen. So that's a very popular one. The Pilot G2. Another is, G2, that is. And another one that's been really great is the Uniball Signo 207. That's got a really nice ink flow. The one that I've just discovered recently too, that's related to the Flair, is actually it's a Papermate, and it's called the Liquid Flair. It's probably got the smoothest flowing rollerball ink that I've found recently, and it's super dense and it looks really cool. The one downside is it takes longer to dry. So if you shut your book, it could transfer to the other page, or if you run your hand, if you're lefty, it might not be the pen for you because it's going to rub. Yeah. But the flow of it and the feel of it makes it so attractive. I keep wanting to use it and just, blow on the paper or something just so that I can use that pen because it's got such a nice flow to it. So there are tons of pens out there. You can pick your favorite. I know some people really like the microns, and I tend to do. I like a 0.7, which is a little bit thicker on the thicker side. I know others, like my friend Sean Blanc. He's really a big fan of the 0.38 millimeters, that real fine. Those dry almost immediately. Once the ink hits the paper, it's dry. Yeah. So, pens, again, you need to buy a couple of different pens and experiment. And there's tons of pen blogs out there that can help you out, like the Pen Addict, both the website and the podcast. you could really fall down a pen hole with that. With all the stuff he's got years and years of research on pens and styles. So that's a great resource. So check that out. So that's probably my recommendation for paper and pens. And software, again, there's tons of iPad apps. I don't know Android quite as well, but for iOS, I really like Paper from 53. I think that was mentioned earlier. They make something they call the pencil as well, which works with their software. It's a Bluetooth with a retractable tip that sort of approximates pressure and can change the line thickness based on the pressure that it's feeling. Mm-hmm. So that's an interesting one. There's one of my favorite Etsy homemade styluses is called the Stylus Sock Pro, I think it is. If you do a search on it, you'll find it. Okay. This is a guy in the Netherlands. He makes these by hand, and what he does is he takes like a crow quill pen handle, which is plastic. He doesn't include the quill at all, and he wraps it in conductive fabric and then glues it on there. And so what happens is when your finger touches this conductive fabric, it travels to the tip, and then it's like using your finger on an iPad. Awesome. The one reason that I like the Stylus Sock Pro is the fabric feels much more like pencil on paper on that screen. So most styluses you'll see are rubbery, and they sort of get stuck on the page, where the Stylus Sock really has a really smooth feel to it. So that's maybe a recommendation. And then there's tons of software for drawing that you can experiment. I would say so many are free, like Paper's free, and many of these others are free. Just download them and try them out and see how they work for you. You'll eventually find one that suits your needs.
That's awesome. Have you ever tried a Wacom tablet?
I have, and it's never stuck with me. I don't know why that is. I have a Cintiq even that I used from a friend, and as much as I liked it, that particular device had so many cables and boxes. I've migrated to using a laptop for all my work, and it just felt so clunky compared to my laptop. Now, if I was a desktop person that sat at the same desk every day, maybe that would have changed the dynamic, but I've tried many times, and for small, individual details like doing an illustration project, it works fine, but I just don't find myself continuously using it. I will say that the Microsoft Surface, I think I had a Pro 1 and probably the 2, 3, and 4 all have really nice detail with their stylus, and their software to take advantage of that. So that's another tool that could be useful. And I'm really excited about the iPad Pro to see, could that be the device that makes it possible for me to use digital tools more than I do now?
Yeah, I'm curious to see what people do with it as well. I follow quite a few people on Instagram that I think are interested in it, and I'll be curious to see if they do end up getting the device and then what they produce with it. So,
yeah, I'm definitely going to pick one up and run it through its paces and see. I'll probably store and test it first, but I'd really like to try that pencil and see.
Yeah, for sure.
From the videos, it looks like it has the kind of resolution I've been hoping for all along. So we'll see how that actually works in practice.
I think if Apple wants to sell a bunch and you're the founder of the Sketchnote Army, they should just give one to you for free.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm not quite that popular yet, but I'll take what I can get.
We're getting close to 2 o'clock here, so I just have another question that is kind of related and a little bit different. Is one of the things I like to help people with is to be a little bit more productive on what they're doing in life and online, etc. So when I saw that you have like a lot of hats that you're juggling, and like UX designer by day, and then like you say the Sketchnote hero at night, etc. Are there any specific tools, apps, devices, processes, or anything that you use to help yourself be productive and get all this stuff done and not get overwhelmed?
Well, it's always a challenge. I also have children in there too. I have 3 kids, so a wife and 3 kids, and they deserve their slice as well, and they come before the other stuff. So I would say the tools. One of them I have right here with me. It's this is something I've been doing for now 2 years. It's a logbook. So this is a Hobonichi Techo. What's interesting about this is Japanese high quality paper. I don't know if you can see, but it's incredibly thin, almost like Bible thin paper. Wow. And yet at the same time, when you draw on it, the backside doesn't show through. So it holds, I guess, even I haven't tried it, but it holds fountain pen ink on that paper. So it's designed to hold all kinds of inks on it. And the productivity part of it is every day I'm sort of writing what I'm thinking, sometimes more, sometimes less. And I use it for sort of keeping high-level tasks in front of me. I do use a tool called Things on the Mac to help me manage more of the detailed tasks. But here I sort of keep the high-level things, like maybe 3 to 5 things I want to do in a day. I also write notes like, I called so-and-so and they said this and that, and I'll keep that, and then I can flip back. And then the other thing that I do for fun with it, and I'll see if I can flip back and show you, sometimes when I'm, in a cafe or something and I need something to draw in. So there's an example. I was having a flat white at Starbucks and just drew something just to have something fun to do. And the other thing I'll show you is I'm a American football fan, and so I've been experimenting with logging the games as they happen. So I'll draw the logos and I leave the windows here open for the score, and then I just write down what's happening, what are the highlights of the game.
That's awesome.
And note it down. A lot like Nick Barnes does with his AFC Sunderland stuff, right, in a different sport.
Yeah,
so
awesome.
It's kind of an interesting way of sort of getting it on the paper, and when the games don't go well, it's sort of a way to sort of vent yourself and let go of it, right? You get it on the paper and you can let go. So it's a therapy in a sense.
Those are the days where it's a lot more scribbly and it looks like you were in a hurry or angry, right?
I actually have somewhere back here in the beginning of the book, my team lost in a championship game in spectacular fashion with 5 minutes left, and you can see how the quality of the line starts getting kind of intense near the end. Here it is. So it starts out very clean and clear, and you can see at the end here, that's where my heart got broken. You can see it starts getting really rough. So
I love it.
It's kind of a way to really capture your feelings and sort of let go of them. It's actually quite nice.
I think that's fantastic. And I like your idea of, like you said, about 3 or 4 sort of more high-level big tasks for the day, because that's one thing I've been seeing a lot more lately of people talking about it, and I've been discussing that with some people too, as opposed to starting your morning off with a task list of 10 to 15 things that just look so overwhelming you don't want to start. You just, like what one person I think calls it is they're big rocks, like that they see these 3 or 4 big rocks that they got to just move out of the way. And then once those are kind of shifted out of the way, then they can focus on all the other little maybe smaller things. I think that's a really brilliant idea. And if you get the sort of big ones out of the way, you feel that satisfaction, and it makes your brain think that you're accomplishing stuff and you do more, right? So
everything's downhill from there, right? Is that a Stephen Covey concept? Was that from the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People? The idea of putting in large rocks first, and then the stones, and then the water, or something like that. That seems like a Stephen Covey thing.
Yeah, I can't remember either because it's been so long since I read that book, and since then I've listened to so many productivity podcasts and things that you sometimes don't know who's got a new idea and who's just building on something that came before. So who knows? Yeah,
that's a great concept though, to focus on the big stones and let get the big guys, the hard ones, out of the way, and everything's downhill from there. That's
the other thing that I do, because I have ADHD, and so I need to have those breaks because I can't focus for a long period. So what I do with those 3 or 4 big rocks is I'll separate them out into increments of 20 to 30 minutes, and I'll do rock 1 for 20 minutes, half an hour, take a break, then rock 2. And what it does for me is it keeps switching up what I'm working on. But by the end of the day, I get all the stuff done because I've just broken it up into these little chunks. And for me, that works as well too that way.
So you're sort of like taking all the rocks and just pushing them, each one a little bit forward until you get to the end of the day and they're all over the finish line, right?
Yeah, like half an hour at a time, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one of the techniques I've used when I really need to focus is the Pomodoro technique, which sounds something like what you're doing, right?
That's what I do, yeah.
25 minutes on and 5 minutes off. That's pretty practical, and you can use it, all you need is a timer, right? And there's software that's often free that can manage the timing for you.
Yeah, I got because I checked the Pomodoro timers because I do use Android, and I found a free app that's really great in that it you put in the task and you put in the time that you want it, and then you just hit a button and it automatically puts the 5-minute breaks in for you, and then you can readjust if you need. And basically what I do then is just the night before, because I also like to plan out my day the night before.
That's a good tip.
is that as I put in all those things and just knowing that I'm going to hit play on that timer at, let's say, 8 a.m., and then it just goes through for me, and it beeps when the half an hour is up, and it beeps when the 5 minutes is up, but it doesn't just beep, it tells me what the next thing is. And I like that because during the day I want to keep my brain free for the things that really matter, like the writing or the creating. And so I don't want to have to sit there and go, okay, what am I doing next? If I've already just got it planned out for myself, it's just a few less decisions. And I don't, I've been reading lately about decision fatigue. So I've been trying.
I've heard about that.
Life. So
yeah, it's sort of a nice framework, right? To sort of set yourself in the right direction. And it's sort of a low friction way to keep yourself on track without thinking too much about it. Cause you did it the night before, right? You're not thinking about it anymore.
Yeah.
I use that trick when I want to do something, like if I'm traveling early in the morning, I'll have all my clothes laid out and everything is in a certain place. And
me too.
to make sure I don't, forget something or I don't want to be like scrounging around for an undershirt, when I'm running late for the train or something like that, or a plane. So those kind of tricks are pretty helpful.
Yeah.
So.
Well, this has been fantastic. I see also on the side that the Laren from Belgium has shared a drawing from class. So like I said, I'm going to take the stuff that I'm seeing here on the side, the pens that you've suggested, etc., links to your books and that, and I'm going to create a Padlet after. That's kind of like a show notes, I guess, and it will accompany this this interview on my site, so we'll be able to share all of this. So I think that's really fantastic.
I'm going to add something right now.
Okay.
This is a code that I got from Peach Pit. And what it is I'm trying to type and talk at the same time. So it's 35% off either of my books.
Great.
If you go to peachpit.com. And it's just the code Sketchnote. So it comes in handy if you want to buy that book or the workbook or the videos at peachpit.com. It just... it helps you get a little closer to Amazon. Amazon typically has the best price, but not always. Sometimes they have sales where it's better to go at Peach Pit if you don't have the books now. And that'll help you bring the prices down on whatever it is. I would recommend too, if you're looking for an ebook version of it, that the Kindle version's okay. Some people have reported problems early on. I personally like the PDF that Peach Pit offers. It costs a little bit more, but it's they watermark it, so it's not encrypted. So you can use it on any device you like. You can move it around, and it just has your name embedded into the PDF, so that keeps you honest. And I just like that approach much better because it's much more flexible with a PDF versus, Kindle. You got to use a Kindle Reader. You're pretty much locked in. So if that's important to you, then that might be a consideration.
Cool.
So,
well, sorry. Go ahead.
Looks like Laren's already got those books, so that code won't work.
Well, I'll pass on to a friend.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Mike, for taking the time to talk to you. I'm so happy that we got this chance. As soon as your book came out in 2013, I ordered it right away.
Oh, thank you.
And I shared it around with a bunch of friends in my office at that time, so everybody was like super into it. So I'm really happy that we got a chance to like I said, virtually finally meet, and hopefully it happens in real life sometime soon. Yeah,
that would be excellent. Where are you in? You're in Canada?
Yeah, I'm just outside of Toronto. I was in Toronto for a while, and I just moved. I kind of come to a little smaller place with more community and less traffic. So
yeah, I've always wanted to visit Toronto. I've heard it's a really beautiful city, so that's on my list.
Great, awesome.
We need to talk about doing Sketchnote something in Toronto. It'd be fun to do maybe next year.
Oh yeah, you should do it. Yeah, and I remember when I connected with you, I also connected with Sasha, who's up here in Toronto as a sketch artist.
Yeah, she's great. She's fantastic. I love Sasha.
Yeah, she is great.
So definitely reach out. Let's see if we can maybe we can do something in 2016. It'd be fun to go to Toronto.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Thanks a lot. Have a great day. And thanks everyone for chatting.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think this is great. I really, and I'm glad that the first Blab you had was with me. That's great.
Yeah, this is fantastic. Tell the guys I really like the tool. It's got some nice features. I like the way it's laid out. It's pretty handy. I might have to try and use this. It'd be fun to do little sketchnoting things. Maybe hook up a camera and show drawing or something. That could be an interesting way to use it.
I will. I'll share with you the link to my other Bright Minds interviews that I've been doing. And I don't know if you know Dave Gray of X-Plane.
Oh, yeah.
So he was on last week, and he had his camera set up, and he was drawing while he was
fantastic.
talking. And then another woman I know from Halifax, she wanted to be on this today, but she has a workshop she's delivering. She's a graphic recorder and graphic facilitator, so she actually had the paper put up here, and she graphic recorded what she was talking about for us.
Nice.
Was really, really cool. So I'll share those on the Padlet.
Okay.
Too, and we can if you want to draw at the same time. I'm hoping in the future that Corey, she's looking at my scheduled upcoming Blabs, and she's going to see which ones she can join to graphic facilitate.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
In the third or fourth open seat that's there. So
nice. That's pretty good.
Well, I've got lots of sunlight coming.
Yeah, I think the sun shifted. The clouds went away in Toronto, I guess.
Yeah. So thanks again so much. I really appreciate it. It's great talking to you.
Thanks, Jamie. This has been a blast. Have a great weekend, and thanks everyone for coming to hang out.
Okay, cheers then, and have an awesome weekend.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
See you then. Yep, bye-bye.